Hi everyone, Scott Lewis here for Wirefly. Today I'm here to bring you a cell phone schmackdown between the HTC EVO 4G LTE and Apple's iPhone 5. And just looking at the screen right now, you can tell there's quite a bit of physical difference between these two phones. They're not extremely different on the inside, but definitely on the outside. So let's go ahead and dig in. In round one, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the design of the EVO and the iPhone. Let's start off first with the display. The EVO has a 4.7-inch diagonal Super LCD 2 display with screen resolution of 720 by 1280, which gives it an overall pixel density of 312 pixels per inch. The iPhone 5 has a 4-inch diagonal IPS or in-plane switching LCD Retina display. Now the in-plane switching means that you should be able to see the iPhone's display at a sharper angle at better clarity than the EVO. And I will say, in looking at both of these phones, that is true. When you're looking at an angle, the iPhone's display is crisper and you can actually see some details in it and still see a lot of the colors, versus looking at the EVO's display at a very sharp angle. The screen resolution on the iPhone's 4-inch display is 640 by 1136, which gives it an overall pixel density of 326 pixels per inch. On our iPhone vs. Razer Max Schmackdown, we had somebody ask a question about the pixel density. Can you really notice a difference between 312 pixels per inch and 326 pixels per inch? To me, the answer is no. When you're looking at the 312 pixels per inch versus the 326 pixels per inch on the iPhone 5, I would tell you that I really don't notice a difference in everyday use. So overall, I would say the quality of the display on the EVO and the iPhone 5 is very similar. The only thing I would give the iPhone 5 a little edge on is the IPS display, or being able to see it at sharp angles. While it does get the nod for that, the 4.7-inch display versus the 4-inch display is quite a bit different, and I like to watch a lot of videos on my phone, so if I was going to pick one, I would actually like the EVO 4G LTE's display a little bit better than the iPhone. So let's move on from the display. Let's start talking about the phones themselves and how they're designed and how thick they are. The iPhone 5 is 7.6 millimeters thick. The EVO 4G LTE is 8.9 millimeters thick, so it's 1.3 millimeters thicker than the iPhone 5. Now, I will say the tapered edge on the EVO makes it a little easier to hold, and you don't notice that difference as much as you would notice it if the phone was square like the design of the iPhone 5. Now, the weight of the iPhone 5 is 3.95 ounces. Now, the EVO 4G LTE is 4.73 ounces, and with the quite a bit larger display, I would expect it to weigh a little bit more. The batteries are very similar in the phones. The iPhone 5 has a 1,440 milliamp hour battery, and it is an integrated battery, so you cannot change it. You can't take the back off and replace the battery. While the EVO 4G LTE has a 2,000 milliamp hour battery, and it is also an integrated battery, so it's not something that you can go ahead and take the back off and replace yourself without a lot of technical knowledge. As we stay on the outside of the phone, the iPhone 5 has an all aluminum back and body, so it's all aluminum. And the EVO 4G LTE has an almost all aluminum back. You can see some shiny plastic up here at the top, and underneath there is where the micro SD card goes. The last thing I wanted to look at in the design round is one of my favorite features of the EVO 4G LTE. Integrated into the red stripe along the back, you'll have a kickstand. So you can flip that up and stand your phone in landscape or in portrait mode. Now the iPhone is going to have some different cases that you can get for it that are going to have some kickstands built into them. But I'm not a person that likes a case on my phone. I like to have a nice small profile. So I think that's a nice benefit for the EVO. Let's go ahead and recap round one. The displays were very similar. I like the physical size of the 4.7-inch display versus the 4-inch display on the iPhone 5. But I like the iPhone 5's 7.6 millimeter thick profile and only 3.95 ounce total weight. I like the fact that both of them have almost all aluminum bodies on the EVO versus the iPhone 5's all aluminum body. But when you're looking at the overall design, you have to take into account the kickstand on the EVO. So for me, I'd say overall round one would be a tie. I think both phones are designed very well. They have some good points and some bad points. You have a very small profile and you have a large display. You have an all aluminum body and you have a kickstand. So to me, overall, round one would be a draw. So let's go ahead and move on to round two. Round two is going to be about the cameras in the EVO and the iPhone 5. They both have front and rear facing cameras. The EVO has a 1.3 megapixel front facing camera, where the iPhone 5 has a 1.2 megapixel front facing camera. So similar to when we were talking display pixel density, the difference between 1.3 and 1.2 isn't really noticeable. So a lot like we were talking about the pixel densities and being able to notice a difference, I wasn't able to tell a difference between the 1.2 and the 1.3 megapixel front facing cameras when using both of the phones. Both the EVO 4G LTE and the iPhone 5 have 8 megapixel rear-facing cameras with LED flashes that can record true HD video in 1080p. I took some still image photos with both the EVO and the iPhone 5. Let's take a minute and see how each camera performed. So first let's take a look at the HTC EVO 4G LTE's 8 megapixel rear-facing camera. This was a still image that I took outside of our Wirefly building. You can see the Wirefly building all along the right hand side there. It was a very bright morning and the sun was directly behind me, and the display was pretty easy to see. I will say that the iPhone 5's display was a little bit easier to see in direct sunlight, but it was still very nice. Now onto the picture. I thought the EVO's 8 megapixel camera took a little bit better shot than the iPhone 5's 8 megapixel camera. Looking at the picture, you can really tell that the colors are very nice and very vibrant. The greens in the grass and the brownish red brick really pop out, as well as the yellow on the curb. I thought it did a nice job of capturing the blue in the sky. You can see in the iPhone's picture here in a second that the iPhone captured it a little bit lighter, and it's not quite as blue, it's a little more white. So overall I thought the EVO's camera did a very nice job of taking this photo. And something else that really gave the EVO a leg up is that it has a dedicated shutter button. So it really felt like I was taking a good quality photo versus trying to tap the screen. It was very natural, just like you're used to a point and shoot camera clicking that shutter button. It's the same on the EVO 4G LTE. Let's go ahead and take a look at the iPhone 5's picture. While the display was easier to see in direct sunlight, I have to say that it didn't quite capture the color as well as the EVO's camera. I can really notice the difference in the green in the grass, in the trees, the brick on the building, and then the sky, like I said, you can notice a difference. It's a little whiter than the EVO's blue sky. So those were the pictures that I took with the EVO and the iPhone 5. And I wanted to show you real quick what you see on the display on the phones, because sometimes it's different when you're looking at it on a computer monitor after you've downloaded it versus on the display of the phone. Right off the bat you can notice a difference in the greens in the grass, and like I said, the building color and the sky color. And then probably my favorite feature on the EVO 4G LTE's camera is that dedicated shutter button. It really made a difference when taking a picture. It made it natural, and it really felt like I was taking a photo versus having to touch the screen on the iPhone 5. So that wraps up round 2. Overall, I would say the EVO 4G LTE was the winner of round 2. I thought it took a little better quality picture. It represented the colors a little brighter, and I really like the dedicated shutter button. Now the iPhone 5's camera is very good and there's nothing wrong with it, but I thought the EVO 4G LTE outperformed it just a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and give the EVO the win for that round. So let's go ahead and move into round 3 now. Round 3 is going to be about the specs in the EVO and the iPhone 5. The EVO has a dual-core 1500 MHz Snapdragon S4 processor with 1 GB of processor RAM and 16 GB of onboard storage. It does have the spot underneath the plastic part on the back to add up to a 32 GB micro SD card, so it does have the option to expand memory. While the iPhone 5 has a dual-core 1000 MHz processor, it's an A6 processor, 1 GB of processor RAM, and comes in 16, 32, or 64 GB for storage. The iPhone doesn't have a spot to add a micro SD card, so you are stuck with the storage capacity that's in the phone that you choose when you buy it. So I think that's an advantage for the EVO because you can add additional storage when you need it and when you can afford it. Now both phones also have cloud-based storage that you can get with them, and there's a lot of different services out there that you can use. But one thing to keep in mind when you're on an airplane traveling, or when you're not connected to Wi-Fi and you don't want to eat up your data, you would be stuck with the amount of onboard storage or what you have loaded onto the phone. So I believe the EVO has an advantage because you can add additional memory as you need it. Now I would say that the iPhone 5 has a total onboard storage memory capacity that's higher than the EVO. The EVO is limited to 48 GB of onboard storage, where you can purchase a 64 GB onboard storage on the iPhone 5. Now 48 GB or 64 GB, that's a lot of onboard storage, and I would really say you would only need it if you like to store a lot of movies on your phone, or if you have an extensive music collection. In my experience, most people would be good with the 16 GB of onboard storage in the EVO that comes with it, and with the 16 GB version of the iPhone 5. So once again, I'm going to go ahead and call round 3 a draw. The EVO has a 1500 MHz processor versus the 1000 MHz processor in the iPhone 5, but when using them I really didn't notice a difference. They both open applications very quickly. I didn't notice any lag, so I would say that's really not a big difference between the 1500 and the 1000 MHz. They both have the same amount of processor RAM, and they both have some pluses and minuses with onboard and expandable storage. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and call round 3 a draw. That would mean our overall winner for today is the HTC EVO 4G LTE because it took the camera round. One thing to keep in mind when you're comparing cross-operating system phones, is that if you feel strongly for one, if you're a big fan of Android's open format and open marketplace, you would absolutely select the EVO over the iPhone 5. But if you're a fan of the iPhone's easy to use, very intuitive operating system, then you would select the iPhone 5 over the EVO. One last thing I wanted to point out is that the HTC EVO is an Android smartphone, and if you haven't used an Android smartphone in a while, I would check it out. A lot of people like the easy to use operating system of the iPhone 5 and previous models of the iPhone. If you haven't used an Android phone in a while, make sure to check it out. It's come a long way since the last updates of Android 4.0 and 4.1, and a lot of people like all the customization that you can do on it. So that wraps up our Schmackdown for today. My name's Scott Lewis for Wirefly. Thanks for watching.